After 6 people were murdered on a remote Bavarian farm in March 1922, the killer did not leave. He stayed. For at least 3 days, someone kept the fire burning, fed the livestock, slept in the beds, and prepared meals in the kitchen. The bodies were in the barn. No one came. No one noticed. That is where this story begins. Hinterkaifeck was an Einheitshof, a deliberately isolated Bavarian farmstead, nearly half a mile from the nearest village, accessible by a single forest path. Andreas Gruber, 63, ran the property with the grip of a man who trusted no one outside his walls. His wife Cecilia was 72. Their daughter Victoria, 35, had been widowed by the war. Her children were 7-year-old Cecilia and 2-year-old Joseph. They were, by all appearances, a family that kept to itself. In March 1922, Germany was fracturing. The Weimar Republic was barely 2 years old, and the economy was beginning to collapse under impossible war reparations. Hyperinflation would soon make the currency worthless. Nearly 1 million German soldiers had not come home from the war, and those who had returned were often changed beyond recognition. Whole communities had reshaped themselves around absence and silence. In rural Bavaria, however, the old patterns held. Einheitshof farms like Hinterkaifeck existed deliberately outside the world, built for isolation, for self-sufficiency, for closing the gates and asking nothing from anyone. That insularity went unquestioned. It also meant that when something went wrong inside those walls, it was no one's business. And it meant that for 3 days, smoke rising from a chimney was enough to tell the world that everything was fine. The previous maid, Crescence Rieger, had left in September 1921, 6 months before the murders. She said she heard noises coming from the attic. Unexplained movement. She believed the house was haunted and refused to stay. Then, in March 1922, Andreas Gruber found a Munich newspaper lying on the property. Nobody in the household had purchased it. Nobody in the area subscribed to it. He mentioned it to neighbors. He did not call the police. In the final days of March 1922, after fresh snow had fallen, Andreas Gruber walked out toward the machine room and stopped. There was a single trail of footprints in the snow. They came from the direction of the forest and led directly to the machine room door, which had a broken lock. There were no footprints returning. He searched the building. He found nothing. That same night, he told neighbors he had heard footsteps in the attic above him. On the afternoon of March 31, 1922, a woman named Maria Baumgartner arrived at the farm. She was 44 years old. Her sister had walked her there and said goodbye at the door, the last known person to see any of the 6 alive. That evening, Andreas, Cecilia, Victoria, and young Cecilia were lured to the barn one by one and killed with a mattock, a farm tool that belonged to the property. Joseph and Maria were then killed inside the house. April 1st. April 2nd. April 3rd. Smoke rose from the chimney at Hinterkaifeck. The animals were fed and watered. Meals were prepared in the kitchen. The beds were slept in. On April 1st, 2 coffee merchants stopped by and found no one home. Young Cecilia did not appear at school. Victoria missed choir. Neighbors grew uneasy, then uncertain, then quiet. The farm, from a distance, looked entirely normal. 3 days passed. On April 4th, Lorenz Schlittenbauer noticed that mail had been piling up at the farm. He gathered 2 neighbors, Jacob Sigel and Michael Pohl, and they walked down the forest path. In the barn, they found 4 bodies. Cecilia Gruber, Victoria, Andreas, and 7-year-old Casilia, who had torn out tufts of her own hair. She had survived long enough to witness the deaths of her mother and grandparents before the killer returned to her. Joseph and Maria were found inside the house. By the time Inspector George Gruber arrived from Munich on April 5, dozens of locals had already walked through the barn and farmhouse. Footprints were gone. Physical evidence had been scattered. In his report, Gruber noted that the perpetrator had remained on the premises for days, sleeping, eating, tending the animals. The murder weapon, a blood-soaked mattock, was found hidden in the attic during the farm's demolition in 1923. In that same year, the victims' skulls were exhumed and sent to Munich, where investigators consulted a clairvoyant. The skulls were later lost in World War II bombing raids. Lorenz Schlittenbauer, the man who found the bodies, had been Victoria's lover. He had believed he was the father of baby Joseph until Victoria told him the child was her father's. He won slander cases against neighbors who named him publicly and took whatever he knew to his grave in 1941. Victoria's husband, Carl Gabriel, was listed as killed in action in 1914, but his body was never recovered. After World War II, German POWs returning from Soviet captivity claimed a German-speaking Soviet officer had told them he committed the Hinterkaifeck murders. In 1971, a woman wrote to investigators naming 2 brothers from Sattleburg. One had reportedly lost his penknife at the farm. A penknife had been found there during demolition. In 2007, 15 police academy students re-examined the case and identified a probable suspect. They declined to release the name. Lorenz Schlittenbauer knew the Gruber farm well. He had been Victoria's lover. He had believed, for a time, that he was the father of little Joseph, paying into the child's upkeep until Victoria told him otherwise. He had also extended money to the farm. By 1922, Andreas Gruber owed him a debt. When Schlittenbauer led the discovery party on April 4, witnesses later noted his behavior was unusual. He appeared to know the layout of the barn instinctively, moving directly to where the bodies were without searching. He said very little. When neighbors began naming him publicly as a suspect, he did not confront them or cooperate with investigators. He sued them. He won. The defamation cases silenced those who spoke openly. In 1941, Lorenz Schlittenbauer died. Whatever he knew about the night of March 31, 1922, he chose not to say. The farm was torn down in 1923. The case was officially closed in 1955, with no arrest, no charge, no answer. A small concrete memorial stands today in a Bavarian forest, about 260 meters from where the farmhouse once stood. It names all 6 victims. 1 century later, whoever killed them, whoever stayed, has never been identified. If you want to go deeper on this case, the links are below. We will be back with another one shortly.